Admission packet. On our first page, we will see individual service plan. Once you have received an authorization to provide services for the client, that would be useful to fill out the following pages. On this individual service plan, of course, you would put the name of the client. The location of service is the patient's address. The type of services on the authorization form, it will tell you what services we need to provide. If we're providing bathing, dressing, exercise, and we would just circle, underline whatever your preference is as far as what services will be provided. And then on totally weekly authorized hours as well, it would be on your authorization form, and you would just write in if it's 20 hours. On the form, it will indicate when the date of service to initiate, and it will give you a start date on the authorization form, like I said. And then underneath that, or a little bit below that, was the individual input of frequency of supervised visits. Clients are required to receive supervised visits just to make sure everything is going well as it's supposed to be. You do have the options of 4 months, 6 months, or 9 months, depending on your company's policy. Above that, for frequency of services, is it for 3 days out of the week? Is it 4 days out of the week? And you would just indicate that there. On service schedule, it gives you a calendar from Sunday through Saturday, which is what the week starts on a Sunday and ends on a Saturday, and you would just write the schedule. If the person's supposed to work on Sunday from 12 to 3, you would indicate in at 12, out at 3, and then of course the total hours for that day. And then you would do the same thing for Monday, Tuesday, and the rest of the week. And then, of course, the client has to sign this, and the agency representative needs to sign and date it. It is very important that on these forms, everything needs to be filled out completely, and always make sure that you have the dates on there, and of course the signatures. On the next page, on the primary home care, this one is when we do a client evaluation. On the authorization form itself, again, it will tell you, is it an initial case? Is it a transfer? Is it an ongoing? And you would just select what the authorization form indicates. You would put in the client's information, their name, their address. The client number would be their insurance number, like their Medicaid number, Superior, whatever, or their ID. Make sure everything is filled in. Most of the time, the physician name will not be on your authorization. Just make sure whenever you go out there and fill out the paperwork with the client that you ask. Because like I said, it's very important not to leave anything blank on these forms. And then on the provider agency, that would be your agency. You would put the name of your agency, your vendor number, your address, and your telephone number. Under describe living conditions, identify safety and health hazards. Here you would put, does the patient live on a 2-story home? Is there steps going to go inside the patient's home? How many steps is there to get into the patient's home? Because that would be considered a safety. If they have difficult to walk, if they're weak, it's something that could cause a fall. If they have pets, because if they use on a walker, if the pet gets in their way, they could fall. It's just something that would be considered a hazard. So you would put on there. Patient has 2 cats. You can put in there. But if they're kept in a crate or they're kept in a separate room, you can put. Make sure you put that in as well. That way we know that yes, they have the pets, but it is safe. Because they are kept in crates or whatever the case may be. But that's what you would just put those type of incidents in there. The list assistive devices, you would put if they have a cane, if they have a walker, do they have oxygen, just any medical equipment that they might have, you would just indicate that there. Give dates and reasons for hospitalizations within the last 3 months, and this is only for the last 3 months. So if they fell, a month ago, you would just put in there February 2024. Patient fell, and was in the hospital, for so many days. But let's say the patient fell back in November of last year. You don't have to worry. You don't have to include that only because it just requires the last 3 months. On the next option where it says describe primary home care, client symptoms and functional limitations which cause need for primary care. Sometimes you will find this on the authorization form. Basically what they're asking is, why does the patient need services? Are they at risk at falls? Do they have arthritis? Do they have an amputation? Do they have back pain? They just want to know. They just want a description of what is the reason why they have these limitations and they need services. And again, just make sure that the agency representative signs, and of course the client, and date it. And the addendum of client evaluation form. On this form, it's just a detailed form of the services that are going to be provided. For example, if the patient needs help with dressing, and in this one, which is the option 2, it says dressing the individual, undressing the individual, and laying out clothes. That is their detailed description of that. Or if we're cooking is one of the tasks. It just says we're warming up prepared food. We're planning meals. We're helping prepare the meals, cutting the food for the client. It just gives you a little bit detail on what. And of course, in this, you can use the first page on this admission packet to help you, fill it out on what you services are being provided. On this next page for attendant orientation, this is something that the attendant, the client, and of course the agency reps need to sign. And again, everything needs to be filled out. Again, this client's names, the client number, which is, like I said, is their Medicaid number or insurance number, the date of orientation, which is the date that this form is completed. It is preferred, or it is better, for the date of this orientation to be done before the services actually start. And then, of course, you would put the attendant name, and that would be the person who is going to be providing the services for the client. The frequency of supervisor visits, depending on your policy, every 6 months, yearly. And then, of course, the level of visits. They're just asking if it's, is it a supervisor? It's who just went out there. On the method of orientation, your first one has to be in person for sure, no matter what. Preferably, it's preferred for it to be in person all the time. The times it is allowed to be done without the patient participation, individual, is a patient that has been established. You are familiar with the client's history, and then it could probably be done on the phone. For example, if there is a schedule change, if the patient was receiving 20 hours and now they're receiving 25 hours, that's something that you could probably do over the phone. But again, with a patient that has been with you long enough that you are familiar with them. And again, you would put a description of the client's symptoms and functional limitations. Again, arthritis, fall risks, amputation, whatever the case may be. Again, we would write the task, what's being done for the client. Again, because this is a copy that you're going to give to your attendant, to your provider, so they know what their duties are going to be when they're at this client's home. So make sure you just indicate what services are provided for them. Let's see. If you look further down, see on bullet number, the third bullet from the bottom, it says numbers of hours attendant is to provide. Basically, how many hours is the provider scheduled to work? And then when it says total number of hours client is authorized for, on the authorization, it will tell you how many hours is the client approved to receive services, and you will write that there. Attendant has been oriented on EVV. Basically, what they're telling you is if they're being explained how they're supposed to clock in and clock out. Has that been explained to them? And you put yes or no. And then, of course, you would write down the schedule. That way, your attendant knows what days they need to go and show up at the patients and what hours they need to work. And then, of course, the client, the agency representative, and the attendant sign it. And, of course, definitely date it. The next page is our consent of treatment. Again, you put the patient's name and their client number. They are consenting To treatment, they're just allowing your agency to give them the services. They also are giving permission to release records. Basically, if we have to share any information with any other agency, they're giving us permission to send information to the other agencies. And of course, their acknowledgement is just basically saying that the first visit is just an evaluation visit. Uh, we're going to give them a copy of their rights and responsibilities. And then, of course, inform them about their rights to take part in any medical decisions. And of course, they need to explain to them about the benefits of Medicaid will pay for their services, and nothing will be billed to them, and then we'll just have them sign and date it. On the next page, we have patient compliant grievance procedure. This is just a procedure so the patient knows if there is a problem that they need to call the agency first. Let the agency know there is a problem so the agency can fix it. And then if the complaint cannot be resolved within 10 calendar days, then the client has a right to request a conference with the administrator or the agency, because if the problem was not addressed properly. And then next step 3 would be if the client feels that the agency was not able to address the issue, they can report it to the Texas Health and Human Services Commission and have the problem addressed. And then, of course, you just require the client to sign the agency rep and date it. The next page is a vulnerable adult patient abuse and neglect. It's just basically giving the definition to the client what abuse and neglect and exploitation is. Vulnerable adult is anyone 18 years and older who receives services from a home health agency certified for participation. If, regardless of the resident or type of services required, is unable to unlikely report abuse. It just gives you in detail if a caregiver cannot supply the vulnerable adult for necessary food, clothing, shelter, if they just need to report it, and it just gives them the legal terms of what each item indicates, and then how to report it, which of course we already went over that on the previous pages. And then the patient just signs the representative and date it as well. Then the next one is just the patient authorization of any records that might need to be released. The patient can indicate, we can give them the entire medical records, or if they want, they can select just the name and address. They can just specify what type of information they want released, and they would just include the name of the person or agency that they're okay with releasing the information. And then they just got more options, and then we would just include the fax number and information that we need. On the next page, the patient consents for treatment. Again, this is just a separate page. It understands that the agency originates and maintains paperwork, electronic records describing the health history. No information will be divulged, treatments, payments, or anything like that. And then, of course, they would just sign that everything is, it's all confidential. We need the patient's signature, and of course, the staff members, and date it. Disaster readiness is just basically explaining to the patient or educating the patient on fire prevention and protections. If they're on oxygen, don't smoke, don't have any candles close to the oxygen tanks, have a fire extinguisher, just little reminders for them so they can be safe at home. Explain to them about the smoke detectors, checking the batteries, and just, going through just some minor safety concerns. And then on the next statement of understanding here is they're just going to initial that they have received the patient rights, the home safety, which is all the information that we covered before on this page, and they just initial, and both the client and the representative date and sign. The next page is just an acknowledgement of privacy. Everything is confidential. We don't sell our information to our patients or anything. And of course, they sign it, and we sign it as well. Patient natural disaster evacuation plan. You would, of course, in the event of natural eye, you would put the client's name, want the following. They have an option to select, I don't want an evacuation plan because they plan to stay home if there is a hurricane. Or they can choose option B if there's somebody that needs to be contacted to help them evacuate. The patient would just put the name and the phone number and the relation of the person. Or they can select option C, where they want the agency to help them to determine a pre-planned evacuation. And then, of course, the patient signs it and the agency representatives, and of course, stated as well. On this next page, patient's emergency contact information, just putting the patient's information. SOC is just the start of care when the services are about to start. You'll put the patient's address, phone number. If the patient has anybody else responsible for them, if it's a husband and wife situation and the wife is receiving the services, you would put the husband's name. It's just depending, or it's a patient with who has Alzheimer's. Maybe a daughter is responsible, and you would just put their information in there as well. And then the emergency disaster: does the patient need evacuation assistance? Whether yes or no. If yes, the patient is registered with 211. Yes or no, which is something where they can call. They can call 211 and get registered, or they can do it online as well. And then, of course, the next one is if needed, were instructions provided to register with 201, which is yes, because if you're covering this page with the client, you would be telling them, about the services, so yes, you would. And then if needed, that the patient assist, did you call for them? Did you call 211 to register them, or did you do it online for them? Then you would just put yes or no. On triage status is just to class the patient on the urgency. If there was an evacuation, like in class 1, are they at high risk? Is their health in a situation where they have to get services within 24 hours? Or class 2, is their situation maybe moderate to where they can wait 48 to 72 hours to get some type of assistance? That's how you categorize it. Or class 3 is, can they wait 72 to 96 hours? Is it a low risk where they can manage, on themselves for that long before services come in? And then coordination of care. This form is used in the event that the patient is getting provider services with your agency, and they also have home health services with another agency. So we would do a coordination of care. We would complete this form with the patient's name and address, indicate what services we are providing, and then we would send it to whatever agency they're having. That way, there's no duplicate of services being done. So, is the client receiving other services? Yes or no? If they are, and then you would follow and check: are they getting skilled nursing? Are they getting physical therapy? Social worker? Any type of services. And of course, you would put the agency's name, and then you would fax this information to them if they do have somebody. Even if they do not, I would definitely recommend having this on file, only because if at the time that you went, they were not getting the services, and then you find out that they are, at least you have this form on hand, and that way you can coordinate with the other agency as far as what's being provided. On this other page, it is the yearly abuse neglect, which we covered up before. And this page is just an extra page that the surveys requires, and is something that has to be done on a yearly basis for the client. So it's just easier for them to note or to identify that the patient is being educated on the abuse, neglect, exploitation information provided to them, or their rights. Then we have the do's and don'ts of the company. This is something that's good to have go over with the provider and the client, because on this one we do not give gifts. The client is not supposed to give gifts to the provider. The provider is not supposed to accept any gifts, whatever it is. The provider is not supposed to transport the client anywhere, whether it's a doctor's appointment, to the groceries, or anything. If it's in the services only, the provider can go along with the client, but they cannot drive. They cannot borrow money for the client, or from the client, meaning the provider. Most of the patients who get these services are elderly people and they are on a budget. So we don't want these providers eating from the patient's food and drinks. Uh, and of course, if do not purchase any items for the clients without any receipts. Do not use the client's phone for personal use or long distance calls. They're not supposed to take any children or friends to the client's home at all. And they cannot switch the hours without permission from the supervisor. So if the attendant goes to work Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, but can't go on Monday, but can go on Tuesday, they can't not just take it upon themselves and change that schedule. They have to notify the office so that way they can do the proper changes on their end. And of course, we do not work if the client is in the hospital because services get duplicated. The client gets fed at the hospital, so there's no need for the provider to be there. Usually the hospital will bathe the client, so there's no reason for the provider to be there. So if the patient is in the hospital, the provider will not get paid for that time that the patient is in the hospital. Even if they go to the hospital and do these services, they cannot go, and they will not get paid for it because it's double services because the hospital is providing it as well. And do not work in the client because if they're in a hospital, like I said, do not leave until your scheduled time is up, again without permission. If you're scheduled to be there at 3 and they want to leave at 1, they just have to make sure they notify you and then find out even if the time can be made up elsewhere. They cannot send anybody else to work for them if they are sick and they want to send somebody else to work in their place. That cannot be done. And of course, do not have any type of inappropriate relationship with the clients. If the attendant moves or the client moves, they need to let us know. There's a phone number change. They need to let us know. The duties are only done for the client only. If it's there is a husband and wife in the house, but the wife is the only one approved for the services, these services can only be done for the wife. And then, of course, the provider does not cut hair or tail nails for any risk of cuts and infections. And then the attendant needs to sign this, the client needs to sign this, and the agency, and just make sure you date all this information. The following pages are just the services of the elderly, and the rights of the elderly is just the legal terms of all their rights they have. And then on the very last page, just make sure you do have these signed, and these have to be given to the client on a yearly basis, if I'm not mistaken, but just make sure that they do sign all the forms and that nothing is left out.